All right, here's the setup. Four gunmen, they enter a Coney Island restaurant. Who's sitting there? Mob boss Giuseppe Mazzaria. He's playing cards with many of his guys. His trusted lieutenant, Lucky Luciano, being one of them. Luciano excuses himself. He goes to the bathroom. Moments later, the gunmen, they open fire. Who's among them? Vito Genovese. That hit didn't just end a gang war, it buried the old mafia and actually gave rise to something new. An underworld run like a business, where murder wasn't personal, it was strategic. In some of organized crime's most pivotal moments, Vito Genovese, he was there. The silent architect, the shadow enforcer. When the commission was formed, he stood right beside Luciano. When rivals had to go, his hand moved the pieces. And honestly, when the old ways no longer worked, his mind forged the new ones. He rose from an immigrant in poverty to become a trusted ally of Mussolini's fascist regime. And then he went from street thug to a really international criminal mastermind. Genovese built an empire that spanned continents. It survived exile. It survived murder charges and betrayal from his closest allies. But in the end, even his criminal genius couldn't save him from his greatest enemy, the thirst for more power that drove him to expose the very organization that he helped create. People, this is the story of the man who murdered his way to the top of American crime, of the mafia, only to engineer his own destruction with a single catastrophic mistake. Hey everybody, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody's doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, my friends, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God for that. So, you see the tapestry behind me. We've been doing all 50, I should say 49. I'm not going to do myself, maybe not do my father, but we're doing documentary style, all of the guys on this list, and you people are enjoying it. How do I know? We read the comments, they're great. So today we're doing Vito Genovese, pivotal figure in that life, and you're going to learn some interesting things about him. You know, a lot of people, they blame John Gotti for the demise of the mob. Not true. I'm telling you, it was the Rico statue. But you're going to find some interesting things about Vito Genovese. You may know some a little bit. He's been a highly publicized guy. They wrote a lot about him. Did a movie with Charles Bronson about the Valachi papers. Genovese had something to do with that. They mention him in a lot of different things. He's always up there as one of the main guys. The family is still named after him, the Genovese family. I didn't know much about him. My father knew him. Honestly, wasn't crazy about him. It was a different family. My dad was a Colombo guy. But he knew Genovese, knew his reputation, told me about him. He wasn't really fond of him, let me put it that way. The way my dad put it, he wasn't a guy that you were excited to be around. But listen, no doubt he made his reputation. You saw the movie Alto Nights with him and Costello. You know what went down with those two. We're not going to repeat that, but listen, he was a guy that again, you know, he believed in violence. There's no question about it. He wanted to rule with an iron hand, and you know, eventually it was his demise. Like so many guys like him, you know, that's what happens in life. I'm telling you, power can be intoxicating to some. There's no doubt about it. We see it in government. You know, he no doubt had his impact on the life, unquestionably. Vito Genovese, he was born in Naples, Italy. He was Napolitan. I know the Sicilians always like to claim credit or blame for, you know, mafia, but the Napolitans were involved too. My father was Neapolitan, you know, came out of Naples. My mother and father actually, both sides of my family came out of Naples. And you know, we had a big presence in that life also. He came to the United States. At 15, he stepped off the boat at Ellis Island, that's where all the guys came in, into a New York City teeming with opportunity at that time, both legitimate and otherwise. For ambitious immigrants without education or connections, crime often provided the fastest path upward. That's just the way it was. The young Genovese, he found his way to Manhattan's Lower East Side, so many guys did, plunging into the street life of Little Italy. By the age of 19, he had made his first conviction. He had met with his first conviction, 1 year for illegal gun possession. More importantly, he had formed a friendship that would shape American criminal history for a long time. Charles Lucky Luciano was his good friend, another ambitious young gangster, along with Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello and Benny Bugsy Siegel. While Luciano became the visionary, Genovese became his enforcer, the man who made things happen. Along with, like I said, Bugsy Siegel, same thing. You know, that the whole relationship between all those guys, they kind of all came up together. You know, but Genovese was cold, he was calculating, he was fearless. He built a reputation as someone who could be relied upon for the most sensitive assignments. In a world where loyalty was rare and betrayal common, Genovese's apparent dedication to Luciano marked him as really exceptional. He was very, very tight. They all were tight, the whole group of them. As Prohibition really transformed America's criminal landscape in the 1920s, Genovese and Luciano, they both rose through the ranks of Giuseppe Joe the Boss Mazzaria's crime family. The bootlegging era created unprecedented profits. I've told you this 1,000 times. It was the U.S. government that made the mafia what it was and what it was in the United States. No doubt about it. No organization exists without money. And again, when bootlegging started to be the business of the mob, Prohibition, that was it. That's what put us on the map. But also there was brutal competition. Rival gangs, they battled for control of very lucrative territories. Genovese distinguished himself as a soldier willing to carry out the most dangerous assignments. He was a tough guy, no doubt about it. In 1930, as tensions escalated between Mazzaria and rival boss Salvatore Maranzano, Genovese reportedly carried out a very crucial assassination. On Mazzaria's orders, he murdered Bronx crime boss Gaetano Reina, shooting him in the back of the head as he left his girlfriend's apartment. Cold-blooded killing. This killing helped spark what would become known as the Castellamare War, a bloody, bloody conflict that would reshape the American mafia really forever. By early 1931, the Castellamare War had claimed dozens of lives. Everybody was getting killed. They were killing people in the streets. Genovese and Luciano, they saw no end to the bloodshed under current leadership, so they made a fateful decision. They would betray Mazzaria, their own boss, to forge a new, more modern criminal organization. That's what they did on April 15th, 1931, my brother's birthday. Luciano invited Mazzaria to lunch at a Coney Island restaurant. After their meal, they began playing cards. When Luciano excused himself to go to the bathroom, gunmen, including Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, they rushed in and they shot Mazzaria to death. This killing cemented Genovese's reputation for both ruthlessness and strategic thinking. Salvatore Maranzano, he emerged as a victor, and he established the basic structure of the American mafia that persists to this very day. 5 separate families in New York with a governing commission to mediate disputes. Now, Luciano was involved in this. I don't want to give all the credit to him. Luciano was definitely involved in this, and I think he was really the architect, him and Meyer Lansky. Luciano was given control of one family with Genovese as his underboss. But Maranzano's triumph, it was short-lived when he began plotting to eliminate Luciano and others because he thought Luciano was getting too popular, too strong. He saw them as threats. Luciano and Genovese, they struck first. In September 1931, Luciano's men, disguised as government agents, brilliant, they entered Maranzano's office and they killed him. In the aftermath, Luciano became the most powerful crime figure in America at that time, with Genovese as his loyal right hand. People may say, well, where was Costello? He was there at that time. But again, Costello, as you know, more the business guy. Very capable, but more business, more strategic. Genovese was strategic also, but he also had he was a true gangster. Together, Luciano and Genovese, they modernized the mafia. They moved beyond the traditional Sicilian methods to embrace a more corporate structure. They diversified beyond bootlegging into gambling, loan sharking. They got union control. They even went into drugs. Crucially, they developed unprecedented political connections, corrupting officials at every level of government. That's where Costello really came in. It was him that was making all these contacts and connections with government officials. That's why they called him the prime minister. He knew how to move among those people. Genovese, he thrived in this new environment. Unlike flashier gangsters, he lived modestly. He spoke little in public. He developed a reputation for intelligence and patience, but also for sudden, very terrifying violence whenever somebody crossed him. However, in 1936, the careful ascent was interrupted. Luciano was convicted, as you know, of running a prostitution ring. He was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. You know, my dad always said that was a bad conviction. He didn't believe that Luciano was involved in prostitution to the degree that the government said he was. He might have had some hand in it, but not to the degree that he said he was. And 30 to 50 years for prostitution? Come on. Anyway, Genovese, now acting boss of the Luciano family, he faced his first major test of leadership without his mentor's guidance. So now in 1937, facing a murder charge for the killing of Ferdinando Baccia over a rigged card game, Genovese made a very strategic retreat. He went to Italy, where he quickly ingratiated himself with Benito Mussolini's fascist regime. That's when he got with Mussolini. In Italy, Genovese reinvented himself as a wealthy businessman with powerful connections. He donated generously to the fascist causes. He became known as Don Vitone among the Italian criminal class. Far from lying low, he expanded his criminal criminal enterprises. He developed a sophisticated black market operation that thrived amid wartime shortages. He was smart. Genovese even maintained ties to his American organization through Frank Costello, who had taken over leadership of the Luciano family in his absence. He was made the boss, and he was really made the boss by Luciano. This transatlantic criminal network handled everything from currency manipulation to drugs trafficking. They did it all. And during this period, Genovese, he actually revealed his darkest tendencies. In January 1943, he allegedly ordered the assassination of Carlo Tresca, an anti-fascist newspaper editor in New York, as a favor to Mussolini. While never proven in court, the killing really demonstrated Genovese's willingness to use murder as a political tool. When Allied forces invaded Italy, Genovese adapted again. He offered his services to the American military government as a translator and fixer. Unaware of his criminal background, the army put him to work. They put him to work helping administer occupied Naples. While wearing an American uniform by day, Genovese established one of the largest black market operations in all of southern Italy by night. This remarkable double life ended abruptly in 1944 when American military authorities finally learned his true identity. They found out who he was. Genovese was arrested. He was returned to New York to face the long-dormant murder charge from 1934. In what seemed like the end of his criminal career, fate intervened. The government's key witness against Genovese, Peter LaTempa, he died mysteriously in jail, likely poisoned while in protective custody. Without this testimony, prosecutors were forced to drop the charges, and in 1946, Genovese walked out of jail a free man. Returning to New York after nearly a decade abroad, Genovese found the criminal landscape really transformed. Lucky Luciano had been deported to Italy after the war, and Frank Costello, he really entrenched himself as the boss of the Luciano family. Patient as always, Genovese accepted a position as captain, and in the organization, and he began plotting his return to power. Right away, he didn't want Costello to be the boss. He thought he was the real heir to the Luciano throne. And from day one, he was plotting. If you saw the movie Alto Nights, you saw that. Even though it wasn't specifically that accurate, it did show that. His opportunity to take control came in 1951 when Willie Moretti, a key Costello ally, was assassinated on the orders of the commission. And that was due to concerns about his mental health and his loose tongue during the Senate hearings. He just went off the wrong way. And Costello promoted Genovese to underboss, not realizing he was elevating his most dangerous rival. He didn't get it. Throughout the early 1950s, Genovese carefully built support within the family while undermining Costello's position. That's how it goes in that life. You think you got somebody close to you, but so many people are hungry for power. You really got to know who you're putting next to you. It's so important. Their life is very intriguing in that regard, and dangerous at times, and this is a perfect example. The conflict became public in May 1957 when Costello very narrowly, you saw this in the movie, survived an assassination attempt ordered by Genovese. Though he was only wounded, and we know who did that, he was wounded slightly, Costello recognized the message. At that point in time, he said, I got enough. He retired from active leadership, essentially ceding control to Genovese, and that's what he wanted. I gotta tell you, I love the wine. I really do. Franzese wine. It's good, people. Not kidding. Now in command of what would soon be known as the Genovese crime family, still got the same name, Vito moved against another rival. In October 1957, Albert Anastasia, powerful boss of what would later be called the Gambino family, was murdered while sitting in a barber's chair in Midtown Manhattan. Though never proven, most crime historians believe Genovese orchestrated this killing in partnership with Carlo Gambino, Anastasia's underboss. I believe that's pretty accurate. At the peak of his power, Genovese made a very fateful decision. In November 1957, he called for a national meeting of mafia leaders at the estate of Joseph Barbera in Appellation, New York. This was a big mistake. You don't call everybody together. You don't do that. It was such a mistake, and I'm surprised he did it, honestly. And J. Edgar Hoover would never even say that the mafia existed. He wouldn't admit to it. He didn't want to investigate it. He didn't admit to it. We absolutely had information on him to expose him. He was a cross-dresser. He was also gay, I believe. He didn't do that at the time. And so he would never admit that the mafia even existed until Appellation. His goal at that meeting, Genovese's goal, was to consolidate his position as the preeminent crime boss in America and establish new rules for narcotics trafficking. That was all about. And I know people are going to say, yeah, you were into drugs. At that time, yes. In my era, no. I've said this 1,000 times, not going to get into it again. The summit ended in a disaster when local police became suspicious of the many luxury cars with out-of-state licenses that they were arriving at the rural property. You know, all of a sudden, all of these great cars and out-of-state license plate, where are they going? So of course the local police, they're going to come and watch and see what's going on. What happens? After they figure it out, the officers raided the meeting, and dozens of mafia guys they ran into the woods. It was a funny sight. More than 60 mobsters were arrested, or they were detained, really, creating a public relations catastrophe for an organization that had thrived in the shadows. Big mistake. I think everybody turned on him at that point. The Appellation fiasco disproved FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover's longtime insistence that there was no such thing as organized crime in America. It forced all the federal authorities to acknowledge the mafia's existence and really intensify their efforts against it. So when you look back, it was really Vito Genovese that started all the heat, that really made, law enforcement say, okay, we got to go after these guys. It was all from Appellation, a stupid meeting in rural New York that should have never taken place. Never. And this is what happened. So don't blame John Gotti for taking the mob down. I said this many times. It was absolutely the RICO statute, but where all the heat came, and this was in I think the late 50s, 57 or something like that, it started with Genovese. He did it all. The Appellation disaster made Genovese a primary target for federal law enforcement. Other mob leaders, including Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, they allegedly conspired with authorities to remove Genovese from power. Who knows if they really did? I don't know. I know they didn't want him in power. In 1958, Genovese was indicted on narcotics conspiracy charges. The government's case relied heavily on the testimony of Nelson Cantaloupes, a drug dealer who claimed to have met with Genovese to discuss heroin shipments. Despite the very flimsy evidence, it was flimsy, it was extraordinarily unlikely that a boss of Genovese's stature would meet directly with a low-level dealer. He was convicted in 1959, sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. From prison, Genovese attempted to maintain control of his crime family through a ruling panel of trusted captains. However, his influence inevitably waned as years passed because people were mad at him anyway. They're upset with what he did. He caused so much heat. People were disgusted with him. His health deteriorated, particularly after a 1966 heart attack he had. Behind bars, Genovese inadvertently, he contributed to another blow against the mafia. He had threatened fellow inmate Joseph Valachi. Oh my God, this guy made so many mistakes. And Valachi believed that Genovese had marked him for death. He probably did. In 1963, Valachi became the first made member of the American Mafia to publicly acknowledge that the organization, the Mafia, existed. He testified before a Senate committee. It was very public. He testified about the structure, about the rituals, about the operations. He did it all. And Valachi's testimony, combined with the embarrassment of Appellation, really fundamentally changed how enforcement approached all of organized crime. The era of official denial, that was over. It was replaced by coordinated federal efforts. I always said the golden age of the mob, it continued through the 60s, through the 70s, right through the middle 80s, when Giuliani started effectively using the RICO statute. So yeah, they intensified their efforts, especially in New York and Chicago and places like that, but they didn't kill it. They still needed another tool, and that tool was the racketeering statute. On February 14, 1969, Genovese died of a heart attack at the medical center for federal prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. So many guys died there. He was 71 years old. The man who really had schemed and killed his way to the top of American organized crime, he died as a prisoner. His number was 16017-054. I remember my number too, 09699-016. And the 016 marked me as an important federal prisoner, and everything, all movement on my part had to be approved by Washington, D.C. Maybe it was 054 before that. His grand ambitions, they were unfulfilled. He didn't go where he wanted to go. And after his death, the Genovese crime family, it continued under various leaders, maintaining a reputation for secrecy and discipline that set it apart from other mafia groups. Listen, they were the biggest family until today. Genovese, Gambino, the two biggest families. And they had some good leadership there, I have to say it. Carlo Gambino, he ran it for 20 years? He learned from Genovese's mistakes. In the Gambino family, I'm talking, he ran it for 20 years. He learned from those mistakes, never to go out of the shadows, so to speak. And what happened? He rules it for 20 years, never even goes to prison, dies in his home with his family around him. That's the way to do it. Unlike most crime families that declined sharply in the late 20th century, his organization, the Genovese family, demonstrated remarkable resilience. It adapted to changing times and law enforcement tactics. It really did. I mean, it lasted, it survived. It had, I think, 250 members during the time that I was in the life. So, you got to give him credit for that. The people that took over, they knew. Vito Genovese's story, it presents a masterclass in self-destruction through unbridled ambition. We see it in government, we see it on the street. It's bad. You got to control your ambition. You really do. When it gets to your head like that, forget it. When power becomes everything and control and money, forget it. I don't care who you are, you're going down. The very intelligence that enabled his rise ultimately engineered his downfall when patience gave way to pride. Unlike other mob figures who succumbed to violence or betrayal, Genovese orchestrated basically his own demise. The Appellation meeting, what did he do that for? Why did he have to make everybody know that he was the boss of bosses? Didn't he learn from Masseria and Maranzano that people don't want that? Run your own family, do your own thing. I got mine, you got yours, but no. He wanted power over everybody. It doesn't work in that life. The Appellation meeting was his grand attempt to crown himself as America's criminal monarch, and really it became instead his greatest blunder. It forced the government to acknowledge what they had long denied, the existence of a national crime syndicate known as Mafia Cosa Nostra. More than any other single act, this miscalculation transformed the Mafia from a shadow government to a hunted organization. Genovese's fatal flaw, it wasn't weakness, it was strength unchecked by wisdom. The belief that his strategic brilliance made him invulnerable. His crime family, it endured. It adapted to a changing world in ways that reflected his original wisdom. But the era of Mafia dominance he helped create began its slow decline the moment police surrounded Joseph Barbera's estate in 1957, finding America's criminal elite gathered at Genovese's command. The master strategist, he ultimately made the oldest mistake in power, believing his own mythology. The man who understood invisibility's value couldn't resist stepping into the spotlight. And in that moment of overreach, he sealed not just his fate, but he began the long decline of the criminal empire he had helped to build. Don Vitoni, he died in prison, his ambitions unfulfilled. But his greatest lesson remains: even criminal genius cannot overcome the gravitational pull of hubris. You gotta maintain control. You gotta live in the shadows if you're in organized crime. So many guys made that mistake, but it's really interesting that this really all started with Appellation. Genovese's desire to be the boss of all bosses, the way Masseria wanted it, the way Maranzano wanted it. They both got killed. He did the same thing, made the same mistake. There was no reason for him to gather everybody, from all over the country, to pay homage to him. No reason for that whatsoever. And then what does he do in prison? He scares a guy, Joe Valachi. Joe Valachi becomes the first major informant. He's the guy that, really talked about everything in the organization, everything. Talked about the oath. He talked about everything. He's the guy that, was sensational at that time. You saw the movie, The Valachi Papers with Charles Bronson. Some of it was accurate, some of it wasn't. But again, this was all brought on by Genovese. So yeah, he was a gangster. Yeah, he was capable. Yeah, he grew with one of the best, with Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, all pretty smart guys. But he was a guy that power really went to his head. That's what happened. So that's the story of Genovese, my friends. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm enjoying my wine. Can't help it, people. You know what? I got to tell you something. For the price, you can't beat this. I really mean it. This is my Areni. It's delicious. People are loving it. Last year at this time, we were in 400 locations. Today, we're in 3,400 and growing. We'll probably be in 5,000 by the end of this year. So, salute to that, my friends. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. So that's it, my friends. How do I always leave you? Same way. Never going to change. Be safe. Be healthy. Drink a glass of Franzese wine. Wine is good for you in moderation. I know I'm going to get hit from that for some of the Christians that are very judgmental. Michael, why are you pushing wine? Well, Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine. He was at a wedding where wine was being served. The Last Supper, he served wine to his disciples, and he drank wine, guaranteed. Anything that you do in excess is no good. Drunkenness is a sin. Drinking wine is not. I'm not telling anybody to get drunk, but wine, come on. It goes back to the beginning of time. our wine from Armenia, the original wine. Proven. Architectural discoveries prove that. So enjoy a glass of wine, and I hope you enjoy this, my friends. I really did. We're going to go through them all. So again, be safe, be healthy. God bless each and every one of you. And yes, I'll see you next time. Take care.